Greetings to you. My name is Brabazon and I'm the Dean of Graduate Research at Flinders University. Welcome to vlog 278. Let's conduct a mock oral examination. Let's. Now, you might remember in the vlog last week we introduced the oral examination trilogy by me preparing you for this space. So the 10 ideas, the 10 strategies, the 10 tactics that can help you survive and, yes, thrive in an oral examination. Well, this week's a little bit different. We are actually going to list a series of questions that you may be asked. So my role this week transforms from your friendly community dean to your oral examiner. Be afraid. So what I'm going to do is and I've written a series of questions for you. I've clustered them into the type of topics that move you through an oral exam. So I've clustered the questions so you can have a go. And then at the end of each of those sections, I offer some tips and tricks to manage that previous cluster. So I'll be moving in and out of roles today. How truly exciting. So there is one type or genre of question that I will not ask today. And we talked about it in the vlog last week. This is the granular question. And you might get one of these in an oral exam, you might get two, you might get three. But these are the granular questions that in many ways you can't prepare for. So an examiner will say, Michael, on page 274, you made this statement. Now, can you explain why you made that statement and the interpretations and the strategies you used to configure that statement? So it's a granular question, right? So all you can do in preparation for those questions is have a good cup of coffee, have your thesis with you, take a breath and be clear of mind, because you can't prepare for them because you don't know what sentence or segment the examiner is going to select. But the other strategies we put in place for you last week can help you with the granular question. So we're not asking that mode of question today, but still be aware of it. And always remember that that particular question is a proxy for research integrity. We ask that question to make sure that you wrote your thesis. Okay, so today I'm going to offer you some more overarching questions that will allow you to prepare. What I'm trying to do today is get you comfortable. Get you comfortable with the question and answer format about your research. So why I want you to have this experience of a mock exam is that so you can relax into it. So when you come to have an oral exam, you've already in many ways done one and handled a series of questions. Now there are many ways that you can use this vlog today. This is a coat of many colours, this vlog today. You can treat it like a mock exam. So hi everyone out there ready to go. What you can do is I'll ask a question and you can pause the video and answer the question. So your first time running, question, pause, answer it. You can do it that way. That's a great way to do it. Some of you may want to watch the whole vlog first and then return to answer the questions when you've had to think about it. That's a great strategy as well. There is also a third strategy, and that is for those of you that just want to get a sense of the ebb and flow of the type of questions that will be asked. This video will also provide that strategy for you. But for all our students, particularly in Australia, who may never do an oral examination, will have to do it as a supervisor or as an examiner themselves, or they seem a long way away from the mock exam. Today has a special opportunity for you as well, because the questions I'm asking can also prepare you for annual milestones. I can prepare you for seminar questions, conference presentations, and in many ways what I've also done with these questions today, to be honest with you, is ask the questions that help you write your introduction and your conclusion. A good thesis should be able to address many of these questions in the text. So a rather special day. So here we go. I'm going to move from a dean, a friendly, hopeful human, to the force of darkness in the culture, yes, an external examiner of a PhD. So we'll assume that, there's about 10 questions in your oral exam. They do vary 10 to a maximum of 20 questions really, including supplementals, but I'm going to ask them differently today in a cluster. So you're going to hear a range of the first questions. What are the first questions you're going to get? You're going to get a range of those, and then we'll move through some of the genres of questions in an oral examination. Now remember, you've got a specialist area of expertise, so all the questions I'm going to ask today will be funneled into that special experience, right? So what I'm doing today is merely configuring for you the general type of questions that you will be asked. But can I say, if you can answer these, you're doing really well. So let's do this. You ready for me to transform? Geez, like the Incredible Hulk, isn't it? This is exciting. Okay, no, I'm not really, because I'm going to move in and out. So let me start. And I'll start with how I often start the oral examinations for students. Okay, so let's do it. Thank you so much for the opportunity to read this PhD. I've really enjoyed it. I thought it is provocative work, and I look forward to see how this work will travel through your career and indeed how it will change our disciplines. But in this oral exam, if you're comfortable and are you feeling okay, you're fine, what I'd like to do is to ask a series of questions for you, areas that the examiners would like some further elaboration, areas where we'd really like to hear your view about next steps. So we want you comfortable, so don't be concerned. It is a stressful experience, I know that, but our job is to guide you through it. So we'll ask questions, and if you don't understand those questions, stop us, and we'll continue to ask it in a way that is perhaps more appropriate for you. So are you okay? The technology seems to be working well, so let's progress. But please, if anything occurs during the session itself, do immediately tell us and we'll recalibrate our proceedings today. So let's begin. If you're comfortable, we'll move to the first question. And as always, this first question is getting you comfortable. So what drew you to this research area? Why did you decide to focus on this topic now? What do you believe is the significance of the research that we've been reading in this PhD? Why does your research matter? And looking back on it now as a completed piece of work, what makes you proud about the research you have conducted? Okay, I'm back. Now, that's your first question, and to be honest with you, that's only there to relax you as a student, give the examiners a sense of how nervous you are, what they're going to have to do to help you through the process. It's a great way to check the tech these days. So if it's Zoom, we can check in the first question that everything's fine, everything's good, we're going well. So this is making sure that you and your examiners are oriented in the space. Now, this question you can prepare for. You will get one of these questions. And the question is often as much about what drew you to the research as much as the research itself. So this question allows you to present yourself and your research at its best. And at its most basic, you can prepare these sorts of questions and answers so you know what's coming and you can relax into it. Okay, now we'll move to the second question. I'm back. Thank you very much for that answer. That helps us understand really what drew you to this research. The next question I'd like to ask, though, is a question about level. Now, as you know, a doctorate must confirm a significant and original contribution to knowledge. A master's degree, although incredibly worthy, is a synthesis of knowledge. So the next question I'd like to ask is very much about levels, to make sure it is at doctoral level. So this question involves me trying to understand the originality within your research. How does your research make an original contribution to our field? PhDs these days are often described as configuring a SOC, a significant and original contribution to knowledge. What's your SOC, and how do you understand the difference between significance and originality? What is your research problem? And how has this research problem been addressed in the past? Why do you think it's important to address this research problem now? What contextually or intellectually do you believe can interfere in addressing this problem? What is the relationship between your research aim and your research problem? How did you configure your research questions? How would you describe to somebody about why your research is novel? Okay. Tough, eh? Yeah, and that's often the second question. So this cluster is about you proving to us that you've written a doctorate here. You haven't written a master's, you haven't written an honours or a coursework master's dissertation, that this is a PhD. So these are tough questions. We know they're tough. We know they're tough. So if you have a good go at answering them, you're absolutely winning. There's no perfection here. These types of questions, by the way, are why students, when they get out of an oral exam, often think, I've failed it, I've done really badly. And you haven't. You've done terrifically, because there is no perfect answer to these type of questions, okay? But the way you prepare for them is just make sure you've got a strong sense of what you're doing, okay? With all the stuff, and it's a huge document, you get lost in the granular details. What makes it original? What makes it significant? And start to think about the differences between what's original and what's significant. And yes, we have done a vlog on that. Thanks for playing. So let's move to the next section. Are you sitting comfortably? Okay. The examiner's coming back. You can tell by the voice. Force of darkness. Thank you for that. Very tough series of questions to think about there. What I'd like to do in the oral exam now is, if I can, I'd like to move to your literature. I'd like to move to your literature review and have a think about the shaping factors in your research. So, what was the gap in your research that you believe you filled? What researchers have had the strongest influence on the configuration of this research project? What researchers have had the strongest influence on your development as a researcher? What skills did you learn in the configuring of a literature review? How did the literature review enable the answering of your research questions? How did the literature review shape and instruct your configuration and selection of theory? Right, I'm back. Yeah, so this is an intricate question, this one. So this is, again, in the genre of a doctorate. What they're trying to do is get you to demonstrate some expertise in the discipline or the subject. So this is a step back from the thesis and showing that you've got a sense of the discipline in which you're working. So as you can see, you're also demonstrating some meta skills here. You're demonstrating information literacy, finding the gap, explaining why and how others may have filled a part of that gap, but not all of it. So do you notice there is a meta question here? And this is emerging in the last 5 years in oral exams I've been in. It's very interesting, where there is almost a skill development or a professional development question in the oral examination. So you saw in my case, it was an information literacy question. What skills did you learn while you were conducting your literature review? Okay, we're doing really well. We are, I promise you, we're doing well. Let's move to the next cluster. Research design, methods, methodologies. Yes, we all know that sort of methodology, bit of a boring conversation, but very important in terming transparency and the repeatability of your research. So I'd like to ask a question, if I can, about design, research design, about methodology. So let's do that if you're comfortable. So what made you select this mode of research design? Do you believe that you applied new methods to an existing problem or conventional methods to a new problem? What alternative methods did you consider for your project and why did you discount them? How did research design impact on the methods that you chose? Why did you choose that particular case study? What other case studies could you have chosen? Why did you choose this particular enzyme for your research? What other options were available to configure it for different disciplines? Why did you focus on this particular region? Why did you focus on this particular period in history? Why did you focus on this material and not others? Why did you focus on this philosopher and not others? Noting COVID, were there problems with your data collection? How did you decide on the scope and scale of your data collection? When did you know it was time to stop collecting data? Are there data that you would have liked to have collected? What particular ethical considerations were important in your research? Okay, so yes, this is a hard section, and you saw here, even in our general oral exam, I had to show you multiple disciplines on one particular question, why you chose that focus and not another, and that works for all disciplines, high humanities to the hard sciences, why you focused on that. There will be a question on that. And these questions you have to listen to with great care. This is the great example where you hear it, write it down, take a breath, have a think. Incredibly important. So this section, if you like, asks that you think about the decisions that you have made. And you think about those decisions and you at least can see the options, the other pathways you could have taken through this research. So now we're moving from thinking about those alternatives to thinking about the challenges, the weaknesses, the problems that emerged. Thank you for that answer. Now, as we know, every research project that we undertake in our career reveals challenges, weaknesses, problems that we weren't expecting. The nature of research is it's filled with surprises, and those surprises can give us challenges. So let's talk a little bit about those challenges now. What do you believe is the most challenging part of your thesis as a researcher, but also as someone examining it? What's the challenging part? If you were starting the thesis again, what would you do differently? I'm interested, so it's 2021, why do you think this research project hasn't been conducted before now? Has your view on this research topic changed as you've conducted your research? And if it has, can you tell us how it's changed? Right, so this question is just a reminder. Don't be worried about admitting weaknesses or flaws or problems. Every research project, from the most senior of scholars, has challenges. Let me tell you about the problem. So I feel very comfortable talking through those issues. Examiners love this section. It's great. And when you answer this section well, this is when you get in your report, the researcher was incredibly reflexive about the research project. If you answer these questions well, your capacity to understand what you've done, what you haven't done, and what you could do differently next time is brilliant, and it will be noted in the report. So make sure you see and know the errors, the problems, acknowledge them, and how perhaps 2020 hindsight, you would have done things differently. Okay? So let's now move to the general section of the PhD. We're putting the PhD in context now. This is this research integrity component again, where we're exploring your disciplinary expertise. Thank you for that. Very honest, very robust in the consideration of the challenges you've gone through, and I'm sure both of us as examiners really appreciate your clarity in that case. That's great. What I'd like to do now is, can we move through, take a step back, if you like. Let's take a step back for a moment and think about the discipline that we share. Think about the field that we share and your relationship with it and to it. So what do you believe today are the major debates in our discipline? What do you believe have been the key changes, developments, transformations in our field in the last 12 months? Now, it's always interesting, there's always a gap between when you submit the thesis and when it's examined. So since you've submitted your thesis, have you seen anything odd or new or emerging in the literature that we should be mindful of? Is there something interesting that you see on the horizon? Who do you believe is the leading scholar in our field, and why? What are the 3 most important papers in our field? Look, I was interested. When I was reading your literature review, I saw that you didn't cite the work of Professor Joe Bloggs, and that's interesting to me, so no problem, but could you explain why you didn't cite Professor Bloggs' work? Why did you select that particular theory? Where's that come from? And as a sideline, just checking, what is theory? Wow, they're tough, aren't they? Now, the thing with these ones is they're impossible questions, right? They are impossible questions. You can never answer them. You can have a sense of the names, darling names, the names in your field, the key research in your field. You've got to know that. You've got to have names, and they've got to be with you. So they're one of the things to write on your cards, yeah? You can't lose those. Have at least some names if your brain goes, as it always does for all of us. So offer your best answers to these questions. There's no definitive or truthful answer at all. Offer your best view, and know that if I ask those questions to 5 people in the same field, they'd probably come up with different answers. So be cool with that, but make sure you've at least got something to fill that space and a justification for those names or colleagues or research areas. Okay, we're reaching the end. We're at the last couple now. Okay. Great answer. Very, very tough questions they are, and obviously our field is emerging and changing radically, and so thank you very much for the insights you've given us there. I think that's a productive conversation. So as we're reaching the end of the oral exam, I'd like to move, if I can, to the conclusion and your conclusions, really. So what do you believe are your most important results? And what do you believe makes those results so significant? Were these findings what you expected to find? Findings. Did you find what you needed to find? Or were there surprises? Tell us about the surprises. How have you verified your findings? How repeatable are your findings? do you think, looking back on it now, that your findings can be translated into other disciplines or other industries? Right, so you'll get a question about outcome, output, results, finding, the end game stuff. You'll get a question perhaps about repeatability or not, noting that multiple disciplines, repeatability is not a thing. So when you get a repeatability question in some disciplines where you go, nah, that's okay, but make sure you understand what repeatability is and call it properly in terms of the epistemology and methodology of your disciplines. And also have a sense of, and you will get a question about this these days, is how, if and how your results can move. So they may not be able to move. They may be of this time, for that industry, for that discipline. That's what they do. That's great, call that. But also have a sense that if the results, so allied health is the great example here, that's where we're heading. So for some disciplines and areas, the results move brilliantly. So have a sense of where they can move and the gift they give the planet if they can move. Okay. We're about to do the final question. I've loved this time that we've shared, and I've learned a great deal. I'm sure my colleague has as well, and I hope it's been reasonably pleasant for you, or at least survivable. So look, we're at the last question, and I'm sure it's not a surprise for you that our last question is about dissemination. Now, I see that you've published some papers from this thesis. I saw 3, and that's terrific. But what are your future dissemination plans for this research? Where do you intend to publish future research from this thesis? Where are you going to put it? What is the relevance of your research to other researchers? Explain that to us. So what will other researchers gain from the work that you've done here? Who is the audience for this research outside of higher education? What advice would you offer future students in this area? What are your plans for your research career after this thesis has moved through examination? Again, no right or wrong answer there. Often examiners try to give you a soft ending to the thesis. They know you're very tired at this point, so we try to conclude it like we started, the soft beginning, the soft ending. Again, no right or wrong answers, right? But examiners love to know that the research doesn't end here. So tell them how you think the research will travel beyond this doctorate, and indeed how you think you'll travel beyond this doctorate. Now, what will happen is after these questions are answered, there'll be a formal conclusion. Thank you very much for our conversation today. I've learned a great deal. My colleague and I will now ask you to leave for a period, and often that period's about 20 minutes, 30 minutes. If it's longer, don't panic, but about 20-30 minutes is pretty normal. Can be a lot shorter, can be a bit longer, okay? But they'll ask you to leave, and you'll be then notified by text message or email, or indeed if it's a real live one, they'll come and get you from the coffee shop, okay? And then you will return to hear the result. And it will be a verbal moment. It is, I mean, this is why I love the oral exam in so many ways, because it has an honesty to it, because someone like me, an examiner, has to look at you in the eye and say, I've really enjoyed this experience, I've enjoyed reading this thesis, and with great pleasure I confirm that your thesis has been passed without correction. And it's I get quite, look, I'm quite emotional. Is that emotional? I'm emotional. So it is a lovely thing to do. But, you know, you could get straight without corrections, and then I'll see you on the way to the pub on the way out. So that's a great thing. Most theses, as you know, get minor corrections or major corrections, so the examiners will talk through the minor or major corrections, what has to be done. You'll get a written notification of all of this afterwards, so they'll then talk through what they're after with the corrections. Great examiners do that, so minor corrections, and this is what I'm after, so that helps you. And look, much, much rarer, you get other options outside of straight through minor or major corrections. Very, very rare where they revise and resubmit, and then some very detailed feedback is given, but that is incredibly rare. So then, of course, at this point, it's over. It's over. So you can celebrate, and your examiners then together finalise the paperwork that is then submitted to your university. As you know, they presented a first report on the written document, and then they take that written report, combine it with the conversation through the oral examination, and create one singular report often between the two examiners. Sometimes they may be separate, but mostly these days they try and have a long or careful report that both examiners sign. So, this is your oral examination. Thank you for accompanying me through this process, and I wish you love, light, and peace. Tea out.